Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Coast to Coast Entertainment Network. I am Ace, and you're watching another episode of the Coast to Coast Red Tape File. Tonight, actually, we need to welcome in our newest analyst on the show. That's right, Joanna. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing? Always get excited. I'm excited to be on, but the subject matter is pretty heavy, so we'll see how it goes.
It is. It is pretty heavy. And then, of course, my usual co-host that I have here, Mr. Mess Around Dave. Dave, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I got my 3 naps in today, so well rested.
3 naps. Nice. All right. Well, of course, tonight we have a very interesting case for you. He goes by the name of Christopher Curzay, and I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. I'm just going with Curzay with the way that, to me, I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced, but I may have it wrong.
You butchered it.
Yeah, I might have. So with that, anyways, Joanne, before we get going on this case, why don't you tell them a little bit about our viewers, a little about kind of what got you into the whole thing about disappearances and murders and things?
So I've always been a crime buff. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I've been a long career in public safety and in law enforcement. So I'm drawn to these cases, particularly those that are mysteries. And in fact, I like the ones that are solved too. But I'm always trying to figure out what happened. Where is this individual? And I don't know if you guys saw and sometimes it comes out that they're found years and decades later. So I'm always hopeful for a good outcome. I don't know if you saw the case just this week where the young boy with autism, he's a teenager. He's missing since he was 16, missing for 3 years. And he was found homeless in a gas station this week. So it turned out to be, a victory, certainly. And I'm hoping the same is true for Christopher someday.
All right. Well, so now shall we jump into it? So mess around. We always kick off with you and your first little tips that you want to give us for the evening.
Okay, so there's actually quite a bit on this guy that I found. Let me see. So he disappeared on April 20th, 1990, and he reportedly told his mom that he stayed home because he was sick. And excuse me, the family vehicle Dodge Blue 1988 Caravan was missing when the parents returned home later that day, and they found a note from Christopher stating that he would be back by 6 p.m. unless he got lost, which was unusual because the word was underlined twice in the note.
Okay. All right. So, Joanne, I'm going to jump to you and tell me what is your thoughts on kind of the clues he's saying, and do you want to follow up with anything?
So I found it very curious. I mean, he was a young man, and I think that, in my personal perception, I think he did call in. He did call in sick to use the family car. It sounds as if, to me, my assessment is that I believe that he wanted to do harm to himself. I believe he had a shotgun with him as well, and my opinion is that he's out there, but his body's out there. I don't think he's alive any longer. I think he chickened out the first day, and then he abandoned the car, and I think he wandered into the woods, and he just hasn't been found.
Well, we seem to get a lot of cases like this quite often about, young gentlemen who kind of get confused in their life. They might get wrapped up with the wrong people. They might get into the wrong things, and then they're not really sure where to go with this. So, Dave, I'm going to ask you: do you think that this case with Christopher, that maybe he just got wrapped up with the wrong people?
It's hard to say because I mean, like, it goes on to say later that like the mom was still getting phone calls from him, like there were background noise of a party, but the caller wouldn't say anything. Um, who knows? I mean, this kid could be anywhere. Like I think, like Joanne said, if they find him, they're gonna find a body.
Mhm.
The interesting part about the shotgun, as they said, the reports indicate that he didn't take any ammunition. So, I'm not certain. I don't know if he would have killed himself, but I think that something happened and he got lost somewhere along the trail. And myself, I believe those. I don't know. I'm torn about it because oftentimes those calls are actually from the individual, but there are a lot of people too who are attracted to these stories and they want to torment the families. I mean, we have a lot of people out there who are demented in their own way. And back in that time in 1990, it was easy to find someone's phone number. You just, well,
Yeah.
I guess you could just flip through the white pages, right? I mean, they have
Right.
the home books, and now it's much more difficult to find somebody's home number. And hardly anybody has a home number. A lot of people just have their cell phone. So it's an interesting case, certainly.
Yeah, the individual, if it would have been somebody else besides Christopher, it would have had to been somebody that could have disguised their voice very, very well. If it wasn't Christopher. Now, I'm not saying, what you're saying is wrong or anything, that it wasn't somebody else, because it very well could have been. It could have been somebody else. But this whole case to me is just interesting. Now, going back to like the shotgun thing, like you're saying, there was no ammunition with them, but that does not mean to me personally that there wasn't something that there wasn't already ammo inside the shotgun.
Sure. Now,
And
Dave,
yeah,
when the calls came in, no one actually spoke, right? They just could hear music in the background.
No, they just heard music in the background. There's no voice to the caller or whatever. There was a what did I just read? Hold on, I'll find it.
very, very interesting because
In the letter he left his family, he wrote that he was going to a place to not even where I know where I'm going. So, and then years later, there was a letter that came from Seattle, Washington, that said that Christopher was a guardian angel and he'll come home when he's ready. And the police later determined that was a hoax.
well, this is what gets me, man, is like, I know the world that we live in, and I understand there's some sick people out there. There is. But why would somebody, like, to me personally, why would somebody want to put a hoax out there and say that, Chris is a guardian angel and then he's going to be back, but it turns out to be a hoax?
Well, the reports also said that he had withdrawn $200 from his savings account that day.
Mm-hmm.
So, I believe that he probably was set out on an adventure. I'm not sure. I think authorities also believe that he abandoned the gun somewhere in Minnesota. I'm not sure why they believe that, but they had indicated that a hunter may have picked it up. But it's hard to know that, and I think that that's pure speculation. So I'm not sure how that would happen. But I think the second note is very interesting, and I think that, I don't know if you guys know, he was also had an allergy to sulfa drugs. So there's no, if he had fallen along the way and never gotten sick, as we all do. Well, I think a lot of antibiotics have sulfate in them. So I'd be curious there'd be no, even if he had an assumed identity someplace else, there have been no medical records, no sightings. It's just very curious.
Which I can tell you, I know firsthand about being allergic to that type of drug, because I'm actually allergic to that type of drug. And it's very, very tough because there's a lot of antibiotics and stuff that I can't take. And do we think personally that that him being allergic to this type of drug has anything to do with it? Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe. Now, when we get to these type of cases, generally we talk about people that were investigated, people that they think are possible suspects. So mess around. What do you got for us?
Well, he disappeared on his own, so it's really not. It doesn't say whether they investigated anybody or not. So, it's just they got a note, and that's all they had to go on.
And that's kind of where I'm getting with this. Is a lot of times you'll see people who they'll say, we reached out to this person, we investigated this person. This person was a suspect for a while. They're no longer a suspect. We're trying to figure this out. But they legitimately have nothing. Like, they don't have any suspects. They have nothing. So this is kind of one of those. And what's up, Brandon? We hope you're having a great night anyways. So Joanne, what is your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm not sure if you guys know that the hang-up calls actually started 14 years after his disappearance. And his parents reported that not only were they receiving the calls, his best friend was receiving the calls as well. And they said they lasted for about 6 months and then they fell off. So I'm thinking that he was alive for a considerable amount of time. I'm not sure if it was for 14 years, but I tend to believe that he was out there. And then I think that something befell him. I think that he would have come home by now. 1990, so what are we talking about? That's so many years ago. I think that he would have come out because it's really difficult to hide now, right? With social media and even, the case was renewed interest. Other people in his life would have come forward, I think, by now. So I believe he's dead, but I don't believe that, I'm kind of skeptical that he killed himself at this point. I think he wanted to disappear and he did disappear, and something happened along the way. And somehow I think he died, not by his own hand, but I do think he's dead.
Wow. Yeah. And a lot of these times that's what we get, because this is before most of these that we're talking about right now are before the 90s. This is when they all started. And so a lot of them will say, you know what, we reopened the case, and in this year when we reopened the case, this is what we did with it. With this one would be very, very hard to even do anything if you reopen the case, because virtually right now when you look at it, you have nothing to go off of. You have a family van that was gone. Okay, you have that. You have a shotgun that he took, but with no ammo. But yet again, we still don't know, like I was saying, if there was any ammunition actually inside the shotgun or not. And then we have these phone calls that people are calling, hanging up. Then we have another phone call that his family saying that they heard a lot of music going on in the background. This is what we have to go off of right now.
Dave, let me ask you this. You spoke about before we came on air about how he was in the Soul Asylum video. Have any of those, I'm thinking if that publicity would have generated some new traction. I mean, have any of the kids and teens who were featured in that video been found?
That's a good question. Let me get back to you. I'll look it up real quick.
All right, and Brandon, we're talking about the case of Christopher Kersey. So this, like I said, this is a very interesting case, Brandon. So if you get a chance, you can look it up too. But yeah, that was actually a good question about the video, because a lot of people probably didn't know that he was actually in this video.
Okay, so 26 missing children were found after being featured in the video.
Wow.
26.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah.
So I think that if he was out there, I think that publicity, he would have been located. And then a YouTuber also reinvigorated the case. A YouTuber by the name of Kaylee, I think it's Kaylee Elise. She featured his disappearance on her YouTube series Dark Matters. And the YouTube is a powerful medium. So I'm thinking as well, I just don't think he's alive.
Well, yeah, because if he was, I think somebody would have spoken up by now and said something. Somebody would obviously have to know. Family member, friend, um, best friend, stranger, even that. What's interesting now is I wish that we had a picture that we could like bring up to say, you know what, this is what the individual would look like now at this time.
So I actually do have that.
You do have that, okay?
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen.
So if you can't, we can probably send it over to Chris, and he can probably pull that bad boy up on there to try and share it.
Can you see that?
Yeah, right there. So yeah, there is the new picture of Christopher Cruzay, what he would look like now. Don't you think it's interesting how they can take these photos and really enhance them from years ago and be like, this is what they would look like now? I've always found that so interesting how they could do that.
I do too. And I think too, when you think about it, the person, and this is if he's a healthy adult male. I mean,
Yeah.
What if he was, got into drugs and alcohol? He could look much, much different than this picture portrays him. But I think too, if you're a teen runaway 30 years ago, if you ran away over 30 years ago at 17, so now he would be a 47-year-old man. I think that, you just change your perspective in life. And if he really was out there, he would have reached out to his parents by now. I think that you'd really start to think about life from a different perspective. And I would imagine that he would be in a relationship, maybe even have children at this point. You couldn't survive without any income. And, I just think he would feel differently.
You could. This is just kind of where I get like lost in some of these cases sometimes, because we want to think that this individual would want to reach out, but it's like we were saying at the beginning, if he really wanted to disappear, if he really wanted to, and he kind of wanted to fall off and not be found again, would he indeed actually reach out to anybody?
True. And there have been cases where people have been found and they've been asked, or they come forward, decades later, and they just say they were just overcome with guilt. So I didn't reach out to my parents because I thought that they would hate me, and we don't even know if his parents are still alive. I mean, that's true. Are any of his family members still alive, Dave? Do we know that?
Well, from what I've read, they still live in the same house, and they still have the same phone number as where they lived in 1990.
Oh.
But it does not say if they're still alive. It just says they still live in the same house. I don't know when that article was written. 2004 was the last time it was updated. So
it's been, it's been a good, 18 years since it's been updated, since they've even actually probably even looked at the case, because they haven't even done anything since 2004. So that's a long time without trying to open up any case, look at it, trying to get some more information about it. But this takes me back to thinking about the parents in this situation. It really makes me wonder what the parents are thinking could have happened. It makes me think, do the parents indeed think that he took his own life? Do they indeed think that maybe he just hung with the wrong crowd and somebody killed him? Because it's like you kept saying, Joan, you truly feel like this gentleman is not alive anymore.
I do. I think too, I mean, as a 17-year-old boy who's running away, I mean, what was happening in his home to really prompt that? He really it was a premeditated, obviously. He planned it. He took the car, he took the money out of his savings account. Typically teens don't run away, especially, I believe he was from a small town, especially when unless something's going on. I mean, he didn't appear from, there weren't any accounts to my knowledge that he was, an impulsive child or a wild child or into any drugs or alcohol. I mean, they don't really speak about that, but it would be curious to know what was happening in that house that prompted him to take off.
Yeah, could he have some kind of mental health illness also?
True.
But you would think, though, but this is where it comes down to. You would think if he did, you would think his parents would kind of speak up and say, yeah, he suffered from some sort of mental health illness. But they were kind of keeping this out. So, was it mental health? Was he just, because depression kind of goes along with mental health, but it sounds like it may not have been drugs, mental health, whatever. Maybe he was just in a bad spot. So, Dave, when you think about this, what do you actually think actually happened?
Maybe his parents were just too strict and he got tired of them like living under their rules and wanted to get away, try it on his own. And, ended up dead from there. Who knows? I mean, the police believe he's dead.
Yeah. And there were reports that he was suicidal. So usually when you're suicidal, even if it's just temporary, there is, there's mental, it's a mental health condition. It could just be a temporary depression. We don't know if he could have been dating someone. He could have been brokenhearted. That certainly prompts anxiety in 17-year-olds for sure. But
because the classes that I teach at work, so typically, this usually stems from some sort of trauma in your life. If you don't have a mental health condition and you're very suicidal, it generally stems from some sort of trauma that you have received in your life. And whether it's like you're saying, maybe his home life wasn't that great. So maybe that's why he truly wanted to disappear, to get away, because of the way his house was. He just didn't want to be there anymore.
True. And if he was living in an abusive household, maybe he wouldn't want to contact his parents 30 years later, right? If he finally escaped their wrath, and if they were mad at him as a teenager, can you imagine how pissed they would be that he's been missing for 30 years?
Yeah, and that the parents would never come out and say, well, we were kind of abusive and mean when he lived here, so this is why he left. That they would never do that.
They're not going to do that now.
So when it comes down to it, if it was, that's going to be completely under wraps. Like, nobody's going to know what kind of environment he was living in, unless somebody was to come forward, a friend, a relative, or whatever, and say, hey, his household was very, very abusive, and this is why he disappeared.
Think about it too. Parenting in 1990 looked a lot different than it did today. I mean,
absolutely.
So it was accepted to smack your kid, much more so than it was today. People didn't even question it back then. So maybe at the time it was just so commonplace that it wasn't even a question. That's how we disciplined our children. So, and of course we're speculating, and we don't want to slander his parents because there have been no reports to our knowledge that they were abusive. But it's just an interesting twist to it.
Yeah, and so Brandon's saying there was people claiming that Jacob Weldering was alive and claims to have seen him all around Minnesota until his remains were found. And that's kind of why when you look at this case, I think right now you're basically looking for a body. Whether or not the remains get found is going to be a whole nother thing. That's where it's going to come up and be like, can they find the remains? I don't even know if they know where to start.
I mean, do remains even, would there be anything even intact at this point? There were some reports that if he had wandered into the woods, he could have been eaten by animals, and then it'd be really difficult. At 30, we're talking over 30 years later. Would there even be anything viable to test at this point? I'm not sure if they were out in the elements.
At this point, no, I really don't think there would be.
I don't
mean,
think there'd be
yeah.
anything left.
Yeah, there would be nothing left to actually. But it's interesting though how they say, how they can pull bodies up after they decay, and somehow they still run a DNA test and everything else. I'm like, it's so interesting how they do that. And
Oh, when they exhume the bodies.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like nothing left of the bodies except for skeleton. So yeah.
Yeah,
Just-
but I think in those cases though, they're in a, when they're exhuming a body, they're often in a coffin, so they have a starting point. If he was like scattered to in the wild, I mean, think about how unless you could pinpoint it, how it would be really difficult to get a DNA sample.
Oh,
even
absolutely.
the animals that may have eaten him, if that were the case, they're probably deceased at this point as well.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. But this was just one of those interesting cases that I wish, for our viewers, I wish we had a little bit more, but we really didn't have a whole lot again to go on.
Especially when all we had to go off was a note.
Yeah.
That's all they had to go off of.
So, next week we might have a little bit more for you. I'm hoping we do. I'm hoping one of these times that, we end up having a case that has a whole lot of information that we can spread out, because we also still plan on doing that one special on JFK actually too. So we do plan on doing that one. So we're just about right at that time now that we're going to end up start wrapping up the show here. So Joanne, we definitely want to thank you for coming on tonight. It's been fun to have you on.
Thank
Definitely
you.
Mess around, Dave.
My pleasure.
It's been fun yet again. So, Joanne, what any final thoughts for you about this case, and then any final thoughts in general?
No, I just want to say, if anybody's out there listening from the Kersey family or anybody who has some information, and we encourage you, of course, to come forward. And it was been a pleasure. I love being on these types of shows. So thank you for inviting me, and hopefully I'll be on again soon. So thanks, guys.
Oh, absolutely. Mess around. Any final thoughts on the case, and any final thoughts for you?
Yeah, thanks, Ron, for coming on. We look forward to having you on many more shows. Great to get that female perspective, and catch me on Four Bros in an hour.
1 hour. That's right. 1 hour. So next week we're going to bring you another case, and hoping it's going to have a lot more information for you. But it's like I've said in previous cases before, if anybody has any kind of case that they want us to talk about, please throw it out there. Send us a message on Coast to Coast. We'll check it out. We'll try and get whatever case you want out there. If you ever want to hop on and make a guest appearance, reach out to us, and we'll try and work you on here. It's a lot of fun to come on and talk about these, but we're also trying to help solve these things too. So if anybody has any information on any of these, please let us know. And yet again, I am Ace. That's Joanne, her very first case with us tonight. So thank you, Joanne. It's been fun. And then, of course, Mess Around Dave, thank you again. I cannot thank Crispy Bacon enough in the background for everything you do. We couldn't do this without you, my man. So with that, we hope you have a fantastic night, and we will see you next Monday for another episode of the Coast to Coast Red Tape Files. Have a fantastic night.